Hey everybody! Okay, so here's the second part of the Canva tutorial. And the goal in this tutorial is really to focus on different ways of editing your project. So if the last one was about sort of how to log in, how to set up a brand new project, now once you have your template, here's all the different things that you can do to make the template look the way you want. So let's get started. The first and perhaps most obvious thing that we can do is to take the template and change some of the elements so that maybe you use some of the same pieces, but they look a lot different. So one of the really cool things about Canva that I like is that almost every single element you can change the colors of. Now, keep in mind that when I say change the colors, usually these are their most simplistic designs. If you have something that has like 5, 6, 7 colors, usually you can't change the different colors. But so for example, if I click on this image here, what I can do here is I can, for example, change the color of it. So if I want to say maybe make a green theme, maybe I'm doing a conservation theme. Okay, well maybe I want different shades of green that might be complementary. I can also crop certain elements. As you can see, this image goes up quite a bit above. So maybe if I wanted to drag it down or if I wanted to change the sizing of it, but obviously I think this kind of works the way it is right now, so I'm not going to fuss too much about it. You can also do things like flip it horizontally, vertically, but again, I prefer how it looked originally. So every single image you can basically mess around with. You can also mess around, for example, with some of the colors in the fonts. So if you look here, you'll notice when I click on this font collection, what I can do is I can change the font style. I can also change the font color. And I can even change things like the general thickness. If I select all of the text, I can change the font size. Ooh, way too small. Gross. Or I can change something like making it bold. This one's already italicized, so it would actually de-italicize it. I could even change, do I want it all in caps or not, by clicking this button here. I can change the alignment, as you would do basically in any word processing system, by clicking on the alignment button. And I can even mess around with the spacing. So this is how far apart. The first one, letter spacing, is how far the letters are apart from each other if I wanted to spread that out. I can also change how far the different lines are apart if I want. And I can figure out which one is my anchor text. That one I wouldn't worry too much about. I can also choose the text up here if I want to make that maybe a little bit larger of size. And I can play around. Now keep in mind that the templates will have document fonts that they'll work with. So here are the two that they suggest work best together, but you can also change that if you want to play around with other different fonts. So with that in mind, you can also do things like ungroup things so that these are kind of set separately. You can edit them separately. You can also mess around with the position of it. And you can even copy it, create a duplicate, or you can make something transparent. Let me show you what transparency does. So if I were to click on here, let's say I don't like the brightness of it. Maybe I want it to be a little less noticeable. I can change the transparency so that the background image shows through a little bit more. Or here, if I want it really, really solid and bright. This one started off, I believe, a little bit somewhere around here. So there's a ton of different things that you can do to mess around with how you want everything organized. And it's up to you to figure that out. What do you think would be most visually appealing for your audience? And that would kind of tie in with your overall topic and your message and your theme. But let's say you decide, all right, I'm going to add a new page. Well, now I've got to start from scratch because usually that second page, they're not going to copy it over. Although you can click this copy page button if you wanted to to create a second if you want the theme to stay as much the same as possible. But let's say you decide, you know what, I'm going to start from scratch. I want my second page to look kind of drastically different. How do you add new elements? So your elements are generally added on the sidebar way over here. Okay, there's a couple different things that you can look at. So let's start with the different actual elements. These are images, grids, shapes, charts, illustrations, icons. You can see over here different lines that you can use to sort of create a little bit more of an organization, separate out the different sections, and frames. Now this is where you have to be really, really conscientious of cost. Certain elements are going to be free. Certain ones are not. So for example, if you look at this little record player here, all right, that says down here that it's free. But if I click on illustrations and I start looking through, I might go illustrations, dog. You're going to notice right away we already have some things getting charged. So if you look over here, the little boy in the wheelchair, you have, it's $1. Got another sort of geometric dog, that's another $1. And if you have this little crown here, that means you actually have to be a part of Canva for work, so you can't even pay for it and get access to it. And so that's where you have to be really thoughtful and careful so that, you know, if you really like these Celtic dogs and you want to add it in there, it's going to show this. If you look carefully, you can see here, there's a little bit of an icon that says Canva. It's going to make you pay before you download it, and you do need to download this infographic. So try to stick to the stuff that's free. So as you notice, this image, for example, doesn't actually have color choices because it has too many colors to determine. It would take too much time for it to edit. But you can still change the size by playing around. If you look at this, these little bottom signifiers, you can kind of change the size of it. You can rotate it by using the circle that has this sort of rotate sign on it. You can sort of rotate it the way that you'd like. So if you want it to be sort of angled, or if you want it straight on, it'll tell you. If you're at 0 degrees, it'll be sort of perfectly horizontal and vertical. And you can see these little different lines that will show you ways to align your image. So do you want it dead center? Perfect. Do you want to follow a particular margin around the edge of your image? You'll see that little line pops up, that little box around the center to help you align all of your images so you don't accidentally have misaligned images. Okay, so let's say I want to kind of do a bit of a vintage theme. Maybe I want to make this a little bit more transparent. It's so bright. So I kind of want it to more fade into the background so it's not quite so noticeable. And now I want to add a little bit of text. That would be, if you go over again to the left side, there's tons and tons of different options. In the text heading, the really cool thing that they've done here is they actually have created all kinds of different collections of fonts so that they already look good together. So if you want something that's kind of like a heading and then a subheading and body text, they've created a whole ton of different kinds for you to just use as a template. So let's say I want to create something that would be sort of music related. Okay, so I might scroll through, see what I like. Throughout here, maybe I'm going to go with this design and go and think about, there's a local company or company here called Revival Records. So maybe I want to do like Revival Records. And then we'll go maybe a guide to buying used vinyl. So maybe we'll put that here, and then I can say okay. So this is where you can start playing around with the text. So here we got Revival Records, guide to buying used vinyl for beginners. Makes a lot of sense. I might want to delete some of these elements here. In this case, it's up to you if you want to ungroup them, or you can just delete them so it's a little bit smaller. And now I've got, all right, so this is the beginning, and maybe I want to overlay it. Let's say you want to, right now it's overlaying the vinyl image. So what I might do then is, I don't quite like how there's so much overlap. I think it may be a bit visually too busy, so I might change the location of where this is. However, if you do want things to overlap, keep in mind that if you use the position button, you can push something backwards or forwards. So which one do you want to be on top? So with that in mind, what then you might want to think about if you start looking at is like, what color the background. So let's say I am doing this vinyl project and I'm not a big fan of this background. I think it's a little bland. It doesn't quite do what I want it to do. So the next thing to do is to click on the background tab. There's tons of potential backgrounds here. As you can see, there's so many different versions, right? And so it's up to you to figure out which version makes the most sense for you. But here's one thing to really keep in mind. If you have a really busy background like that, it gets really hard to see what's going on in an infographic. So generally when you design an infographic, you want to stick with really plain and basic backgrounds and focus, if you want more illustration, on either single images or borders. So let's say I make this a little bit more visible so there's a little bit more of a distinction. Okay, so now I've got to start. Here's maybe an introduction to my infographic. So with that in mind, maybe I want to say upload an image. Okay, that's actually pretty simple. It's the next tab underneath backgrounds. Oh, really quick, if you do want to do just a solid color, sorry, I forgot to mention this, you can click on this solid color button at the very top and it'll give you a range of colors. If you want to choose your own color, you click on this button and you can choose whatever range that you want. But we're going to skip that. I'm going to go back to what I had there. So with this in mind, if you want to upload something, you click on the upload button. As you notice, I already have something that I've uploaded there, an image that I found online. That was free. Then remember, if you want to upload something, you either have to own it, you've made it yourself, you own the rights to it, or it needs to be Creative Commons. You can't steal from other people's work online and upload it into your own project. That's considered really unethical and will count as plagiarism. So you can upload here, you just click on this button and it uploads like any other uploading program. The main thing is to make sure that you have the right sort of program. So PNG works, JPEGs work, but just make sure that it's something that they can actually handle. So now let's say you want to go back and you're like, well, Mickey, I want to add a chart. I think a chart would really be useful. I think it would help guide my reader. Maybe I want to track how used vinyl has grown in the last few years. Well, there's all kinds of charts. You go back to the Elements tab over here, and you can click on the charts. Now they have a couple sample ones listed out there, but maybe you want to look at a couple other designs. They have a couple different color palettes. They have all kinds of Venn diagrams, and you know how I love a good Venn diagram. As you start to move further, you again will start to notice that some of them are not all of these are going to be free. So again, keep in mind when you're choosing a chart to make sure that you're choosing something that is that is free. In other words, so you don't need to pay. But the cool thing, again, you can edit the colors of your chart. So if you don't particularly like these colors here, you can play around with the different color options so that it sort of suits your own visual aesthetic. The other thing is that you can start changing the numbers up here. This here is where you can start adding things so that it all makes sense. You can paste data from a spreadsheet down here. Generally, you're not going to be doing this that much, but just keep that in mind. You can also play around with things like the font size so that the items around here. You can change the titles. So let's say if I was going to track how many used records were sold in 2010, 2012, 14, 16. Now I can also add new if I want, or not. It'll adjust as necessary. And I can also choose if I want to say, oh wait, I regret, I don't want to do a bar chart. Maybe I want to do a line chart. and then I can start playing around that way. Just make sure that you don't accidentally switch. As you saw here, it deleted a lot of my data. So just be careful when you go that route so you don't actually change your product too much. So with that in mind, again, you can change the different colors as I mentioned, the font size, the font color, whether or not you want that font bold or italicized or not. And so with that in mind, that's pretty much everything, all of the main basics you need to know to edit. There's all kinds of different elements you can add, and I really suggest, being open to playing around with some of the different elements that you might want to add in there. So think about the different organizational things you might want to add. So creating maybe distinctions using lines. And again, make sure you've lined it up so it's centered. But if you have any questions or you want any extra help, I'm absolutely happy to guide you through some of these things. And again, don't forget, when in doubt, just search this tab up here. If you're not sure what you want to add, if you want to add an image of, I don't know why I chose vulture, but you can search that way. Say if I wanted more images for vinyl, I can search through here and hopefully it will come up with all kinds of cool free illustrations that I can then use to make my infographic really visually appealing. All right, let me know if you have questions.